and trying to keep away from deliberations, it seems to me that proximity to a historic structure could be a criteria or a hindrance. You're not going to put up a strip mall right in front of the Washington Monument. So I just feel like there might be something there, but we can talk about that more later. Are there any other questions before we hear from the applicant? Okay, well, I believe the city attorney, it's your turn.
At this time, this is a reminder to those of you testifying that you should direct your testimony towards the applicable criteria of the case or other criteria in the municipal code, comprehensive plan, or land development code which you believe to apply to this decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the city or other parties the opportunity to respond to that issue precludes an appeal to the State Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. The failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government to respond to that issue precludes an action for damages in the circuit court.
Thank you. We will now hear the applicant's presentation.
Scott Ramsey, 225 North 8, Plymouth. When I first came in to talk to Chris and Pat, my original question was, I've already gone through this 18 years ago. I went to the planning commission, and at the time, my garage and everything was still standing on the property. And I had that argument that, look, the old carriage house is there. I'm going to rebuild it. I'm going to plan on putting it right back in the same location, not exactly in the same location, move it a little bit more off the property line, from the property line than where it was. So before I ever tore down the garage, I went through this process of getting this variance approved. So went through that, got everything done. I think Ben was mayor at the time. But unfortunately, the company I was working for went bankrupt, and all the money I had set aside to build that garage. So I didn't tear down the old garage until I got the variance approved. Then the company went bankrupt. I had a choice, either build the garage or build a machine shop out on South 3rd Corvallis. I built a machine shop. We have 14 employees. I've been working for the state for 20 years. We're back in a position of, now we've got some money set aside again, we can build that garage. Then I went to our developer and he's like, did you realize this thing, your current variance expired 3 years ago? And I did not know that. And if I would have known, I would have put that foundation in 5 years ago. I didn't know that I had a clock ticking and that it was about to run out. And so when we got ready to start doing the design work on the building, my architect looked at it and said, no, this expired, you need to go back to the city. So I went back to the city, talked to Chris and Pat and said, hey, I've already got this thing, I already did this variance. Had I known that, I would have never torn down the old garage, because I tore that down with the intention of starting this new garage that I got the variance for. And then, life things happen. I got, they went bankrupt, and I spent almost 20 years trying to build up a viable business. That's where all the money for the garage went. So originally, when I came to him, I just asked him, is there any chance that I could get just an extension on what we have here? It's only lapsed by 3 years. It was a 15-year variance. I did have the original building. I didn't tear it down. I photographed it. One thing I would like to say, so I've been asked a couple questions. Can that building be built on other people's property? In fact, I think one thing that Pat brought up and said, you could do an attached garage. If you know anything at all about historic properties, at all, like the biggest #1 thing in getting this thing on the National Registry, I had to measure every single inch of that foundation. What you do at the inside of the house, they don't care about, as long as it's got the original footprint on the original site of the original footprint of the building. For instance, what used to be the woodshed on my house is now my laundry room. Doesn't matter what you do at the inside, as long as you do the same footprint. At that time, we measured up where the garage is on the property. That's part of what I submitted to the state. Here's where we're planning on building a garage here. Here's where we're doing the house. We had to jack the house up, put the foundation down for that. All that had to be approved by the state. So putting an attached garage on would almost instantly, not almost, it would make the building no longer nationally registered. You can't put an attached garage on. Buildings, the 1800s did not have attached garages. They had carriage houses. So I can't do that. Now, I could build one that's within the limits, which I drew up some drawings there, but that would put me down to, if you go to the 15-foot, that would put me at a 14-foot wide garage. That would give me a 10-foot wide, a single car garage door. I would like to put it in 24-foot, which is the original carriage house was more like 28 feet. And I want to put it into 24 feet. The original one was 3 feet and 5 feet off the property line. I'd like to go 5 and 5. In the city of Philomath, there are properties all around, depending on if you're on an alleyway. Most properties have 5-foot variances all the way around their property, except for the part that's on their street. Mine has an 8th Street address only because when my house was built, it faced College Street. And that's what should have been the address, except the railroad tracks went in the 1880s and my house was built in the 1870s. So it's the only house in Philomath that faces the railroad tracks. It's the only house in Philomath on the National Registry. It took a lot of money to put that house on the registry. I had to put all original, the siding either had to be remilled from a new mill, or I salvaged off of 4 different houses in the local area when they were being torn down to make sure that every stick of siding on that house is 100-year-old siding. I had to put wood over wood windows in to keep it on the National Registry. It is not cheap to put a house on the National Registry. So doing something like putting an attached garage on, to me, that would just throw out a lot of hard work and a lot of effort, and seeing how that there is no Philomath Historic District, I'm pretty much it, other than me and the college building. I am the president of the College of Philomath Community Corporation. We are trying to get another building up here on 10th and Pioneer on the National Registry. We've got the bell tower back on. We're going to put the staircase back on, and once we get that on, we should be eligible for the National Registry. That's a side story. So anyway, I already did this. It was, had I read the fine print here and saw the 15-year thing, I would have put this foundation in 3 years ago. I was really hoping to just get an extension on what's already been approved. I already went through the planning commission. I actually went and appealed it to the city council, and to get all this done and documented everything. And it was just, I could have probably afforded to start that 3 years ago. I just didn't realize what I was up against the timeline here. So unfortunately, the variance lapsed 3 years ago. So I would like to put the garage back where the old garage originally was. It would allow me to have a normal sized garage. If I go to the current standards, I will have a 14-foot garage, which means I could put a 10-foot door in with 2 feet on each side so I could actually get the door framed in. I think it's going to look ridiculous there to have this little narrow garage next to this big house, and it won't be anywhere near historically where the old garage was. It's not going to be. I know if I attach the garage to the house, that the house will no longer be nationally registered. So that's not an option. The only option I have is to build an abnormally small garage, and I was really just hoping to get an extension of what I already got all approved and everything I already did.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Millar?
What year was the original planning commission approval?
It's like the second page in on the.
I apologize then if I did not.
I think it was 2000, December of 2000. So it's like,
It was December of 2000.
yeah.
And the building in question that was removed, since that appears to be leave it as a question. The building that was removed was was a shed garage type of structure.
Well, they didn't have cars back then. They had, when they came and did the National Registry appraisal on the house, and I put my whole house through where they do the whole historic thing. The people doing the historic write-up on it, they came in and first thing they said is, I go, well, this is a quote carriage house. This was built for a carriage. They didn't have cars back then, so they had carriage houses. And they typically don't put them attached to the house because that's a fire hazard back then.
Right.
Not now, but nowadays they attach the garages to it. My preference would be to keep this as historically accurate as possible.
I need to ask the attorney a question. I have in front of me the National Registry registration form for this property. Is it fair to ask questions based on that document? The specific question that I have in this document is in the write-up. It indicates that it was approximately 14 by 14 in size and that it was built on the northwest corner sometime about a certain period, approximate size. The original construction was similar to the houses with the windows, and another place in the document, as I say, I'm reading out of the actual recorded document, indicated that it had no foundation. It was literally sitting on a mud sill. Is that fair to present, or is it?
If it's part of the application, it's already part of the record. If you have questions about it, that would help you determine.
It's not physically part of the record. It has not been presented here as evidence. That's why I'm asking the question.
Did you go and just look up online?
I did the research online, yes. I pulled it, it's a federal document.
Okay.
But if I can't use it, then I can't use it, and that's fine. I just want to, okay, all right, then I'll ask the question a different way.
If it's not part of the record, because the applicant hasn't presented it to you.
Right, I can't use it.
You shouldn't ask questions about it either.
No, I'm going to ask something else.
Okay.
So the original, you removed the building, about what time did you remove the building?
Shortly after I got the approval to put for the variance.
So somewhere in that same time
Well,
period.
I'd say 2001, 2002.
Okay.
It was also becoming a hazard for people in the neighborhood. It was starting to lean really bad, and I was worried about kids getting in there and stuff, and so it didn't take much to pull it over. But just when I did talk to the state about this, part of the agreement is that I would use similar siding to what's on the house, and that the construction type would match the house, which is my intention. I don't want it to look out of place. I don't want it to look abnormal. It would be built so that only I would know and you, but most people driving by would not know it was not a historic feature on the house. That's part of the agreement when you build that with the state, is that you match the wood siding.
Is the footprint that you are asking to do today, that you asked in the variance, the same footprint that was approved in the earlier variant, in the earlier planning commission document?
Yes.
Dimensional wise, it's the same footprint.
I don't remember what I drew up. It was something similar. It was trying to build, still keep it in the same location, but also make it a usable garage. I couldn't make it the same height and stuff because it was only 7 feet tall.
But as far as the footprint's concerned, because what we're talking about here is the location on the property, which is a horizontal plane.
Yes,
so
the plan I submitted to the
come into
city did have it longer, like it's drawn now, than what the original one was, which makes it deeper. And that is what I had approved by the city of Paloma.
I have a question.
Sure.
So on one of these drawings, on the proposed garage, looks like you're intending to access from where the driveway is at the corner of College and 8th. You're gonna drive up there and park, just drive straight up there and pull into your garage.
That's where the driveway's been ever since I've been there, for as long as I've ever known. There's also a driveway that comes up behind it that uses the alleyway behind the house, behind the garage. And that, where we normally park the cars is back up here behind the current historic home. But coming up the driveway, the driveway would come up to the front of the garage here.
Okay, in the historic version of that, how was that garage accessed? Because it does look like, the it looked like maybe the driveway comes up around here and then you would pull in into the old garage from the east?
Yeah, well, right now, it's a loop. Right now, the driveway, you can come up the driveway along the alleyway here, and you can go down the driveway here. It's a big loop.
So the entrance is different than, it's on the different side?
Well, it would, right now, it's still the same way. We haven't changed that, but in order for me to put a garage in that is not 20 feet deep, but is, what have I drawn in there? Yeah,
It looks like it's 30 feet deep.
yes, 30 by 20. You would not have there would not be enough room there to drive the cars between the garage and the house. And that was intention to just be a sidewalk that walks around there. I would like.
So does changing that relationship, accessing it from the south instead of from the east, does that affect your SHPO issue at all?
I actually do not know the answer to that question. I don't think so. Nobody's ever said anything to me about it. We have talked about taking that driveway and going to the left of the garage and going back out to the alleyway and down. I would like to point out that on this second page in here, that from the pin on the property, it is 40 feet to the edge of the street. We have all that's property that we are required to maintain. It's actually city property, but most people don't realize that the corner to my property is up in the middle of my yard. There's a pipe sticking up out of the yard up there in the middle of the yard, and that's the actual corner of the property. There's at least 40 feet between the pin and where the edge of the street starts. When 8th Street got developed, it was developed out 40 feet of the 80 feet, and all 40 feet is on the west side. And so the east side didn't get developed at all. I don't know if there's any plans in the future for it, but nobody would know where that pin was if you don't know where the pins are located, you would not realize that the pins to that property are up in the middle, right, pretty much up in the middle of the yard.
Commissioner Jessen's had his hand up for a while, so. Sure.
Thank you. What size was the original structure that you tore down?
About 20 by 30. The 28 feet wide by 20 feet deep. And that included an overhang on the side. But the overhang looked like it had been there as long as the building itself. There were 4 walls, and then there was an overhang that made up the extra, like 6 feet off to the side.
Okay, so the total footprint of the original structure was about 28 by 30?
No, 28 by 20. Or, yeah, 28 by 20 is what I have drawn. That's what we measured up.
28 by 20, okay. And the size of the new structure you want to build?
24 by 30.
24 by 30. Okay, and
I'll point out there are 2 drawings in the packet that show that.
I didn't see the original structure in the packet.
There's one page that it says in red, original garage, carriage house.
Okay. And then changing the orientation from south, or from originally eastern facing to now southern facing-ish?
Well, no, the front of the carriage house has always been right where it would be, and that's where it would be here. The point I was trying to make earlier is when the house was built, that it was intended that the house faced College Street, but now there's railroad tracks go down it. It was put in, 15 years after the house was built.
Right. And so the reason for the Class C variance is to maintain historical accuracy?
Yeah, it just, it would be very much closer to where the garage or building or carriage house was than if I have to use the 15-foot setbacks It's gonna put it way up closer and real close to the house.
But we're just talking about that one corner of the alleyway on 8th, right? We're not talking about the entire size of the structure, because that's, I mean, we could split hairs about which
Sure.
side was where, whatever.
Yeah, it was originally 3 feet from the alleyway and 1 foot from the 8th Street, and I would like to put it 5 feet and 5 feet,
Okay.
which is
Are
more.
I'm just curious, are you also gonna use salvage material to build this, and you're intending to get this in the historic registry as well?
No, I'm not planning on getting it in the National Registry. I'm just gonna plan on building it so it's a similar structure, so it doesn't look out of place with the house. Salvaging that siding is a very hard, difficult job to do, and I don't know that I can find that nowadays. 20 years ago, there was a lot of houses in the area of that age that were getting tore down. One was the Kiesel house up here, which got tore down so they could build the OSU Credit Union, and I got a lot of the siding off of that place. But there's not many of them being tore down, and most of them that are left are being salvaged, and I don't know that I'd be able to find that much siding again.
So this will look like a kind of a modern standalone garage. It won't look like the historic structure.
It'll be like the historic structure is in the trimming, and everything will be the same. I'll have it trimmed out with 2x6s on the corners. We'll use flat shiplap, 6-inch shiplap on the sides. It will be trimmed out and built and designed in a way that doesn't take away from the historic value of the house. But no, I'm not planning on trying to get this on. I don't think I could get this on the National Registry.
Okay, so if the commission does choose to deny this application, would that affect your historic standing of the house structure at all?
Not as long as I don't attach it to the house. I don't believe so.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Barlow.
Thank you. I'm looking at the second page of the staff report, and there's a concern expressed that putting the garage in the proposed location would back it right up to your neighbor, and in fact obstruct your neighbor's visibility from its location. Is the neighbor to the north? It's identified. It says the placement of the garage would essentially back up to their front yard, which would be detrimental to the purpose of this code. One, is that your observation as well? And two, was that particular issue discussed? You mentioned the process you went through 23 years ago to get approval. Was that a concern, and how was that addressed then?
No, but the first thing I did is went and talked to John, who's my next door neighbor, and he actually offered to come down here tonight and speak in favor of it. And I told him I don't think that's going to be necessary, but he offered to come down here and say that he's all in favor of me building this garage.
He's your neighbor to the north?
Yeah, he's a neighbor to the north.
And you may have already answered my second question, but was this an issue back in 2000?
No, because his house wasn't there then.
Okay.
His house is newer than that. His house was built about probably 2005.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Commissioner Hunsaker, did you have your hand up?
Well, I guess so. I mean, I think it was partially answered just now, so that's why I took it down. But in my mind, as I look at this criteria, I do believe that the issue of keeping the property historic.
Well, let's try not to deliberate, Van. You got a question?
Okay, well, yeah, I'll ask Scott in the sense is, you have said that your neighbor said it's okay for you, for you to put up this structure. From the SHPO, do you have any document that says that the property won't, if you just put up whatever garage wherever on that property, will the whole property no longer be historic? Or is there something that says that we can see that says, yes, you have to do it basically like it was, in order to maintain a historical,
No,
the
the
rest of your property, right? You
No,
understand?
The one that's addressed to Mr. Menard, who was the senior planner back then, and it's just basically saying what I've reiterated, that it's their preference that we tried to match the footprints and put buildings back where the same buildings were, and that I had to apply to, like, I basically had to rip off the whole back of the house because it was rotting and falling into the ground. But I had to follow the same footprint, and that was their preference, is that any things that we do to the house, that we try to keep things in the same footprint as where they were, they're in the same location. And I do not have anything that says if I don't put the garage exactly where it was, that it would take me off the registry. I just know if I attach it to the house, it would be.
Okay, because I of course wouldn't want that to happen. So, okay, thank you.
Gary?
I think I'll wait for deliberations.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Was the original variance, was that approved by the planning commission or was it then appealed to the city council?
I was trying to remember that. In fact, we were just having that discussion. I think we actually did appeal it to the city council. I believe that we went in and then as soon as it was denied, I just applied to the city council that I went through that. So that's probably what I'll do.
One other question I noticed, I don't think this is an issue, but when I went by, there's a large tree on the west side of the park. Are there any trees that would be impacted by building this?
Trees of,
Trees you'd have to take out.
there is a tree there, and it is one of those horribly bad pines. It is leaning really bad towards John's house. John has asked me to take it out. It would be immediately to the west of that garage, and it is not very healthy of a tree. It is something that's been on my list to take out, but it's mainly because it's a very unhealthy tree and it leans very heavily to the north.
Is that it?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
But it's leaning very heavily towards the north, and it curves out, and it's bleeding really bad. I don't know how long it'll still be alive, but it's not very healthy. It's not a very healthy tree.
Okay. Thank you.
I would not have to take that tree out in order for the garage in. My plan is to take that tree down at some point before it becomes a real hazard.
Okay, any other questions for the
It looks like
applicant?
there's one more, is that one?
That one's already gone. That one was taken out a couple years back.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And there's still no testimony?
No.
Okay, thank you. Does the planning commission have any further questions of staff before we allow any rebuttals and move into deliberations?
I do. So there's public right-of-way between the historic property and the neighbor to the north. That it goes over the hill, but it's not continuous. It looks like a driveway goes up from 8th, but it doesn't connect over to the next street, which is probably 9th.
You're talking about this through here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's public right of way. So what are the chances that would be improved at some time, or even?
Are you talking about the east-west alley or the north-south alley?
The east-west,
The
which would
east-west
be
alley
right
that
next,
it's right next to.
not right next to where the garage would be built. So would that ever get improved? Would it ever, have reasons that having the garage in that location would impact visibility. Could we put a bike ped path through there? Just kind of another topic, but, you know, would we ever be using that and find that garage being so close would be an issue?
Development of alleyways is typically subject to adjacent development, so it'd be private development adjacent to it that would trigger the need for it to be paved. The city doesn't just pick alleyways and go in and decide that they need to be paved and do it, so it'd be triggered by development. So, you know, there's an empty lot there. If a house were to go in there, there's requirements in the development code that require alleyways and unimproved streets to be paved leading up to a home.
But what makes that a legal what makes that a legal lot is not the alleyway frontage, it's the street frontage along College.
Right.
And there's plenty of street there for driveway to go in on College.
Oh, it's there.
Yeah, so that's what makes it a legal lot, is it has more than the 25 feet required of legal street frontage, and that frontage actually is on College Street. There's actually kind of a developed driveway there.
So to answer the question, it would be triggered by development of private property there. It wouldn't be triggered by something the city would impose without some type of development that triggered paving that.
I own that lot also.
And you'll have a minute, the formal process, you'll have the opportunity to rebut anything that's said in this space, so
Okay.
you should let us talk for a while. And
All right.
As far as being in the way, that there's specific setbacks to public right-of-ways that are intended to provide setback from right-of-ways. In the front yard, it's 15 foot to the front door, 20 feet to the garage. On corner lots or lots that corner an alleyway, it's 15 feet as well. Interior lots, it's 5 feet on a side yard, 15-foot backyard. So those setbacks are important when you've got right-of-way there. But again, an unimproved alley right-of-way today, not a big deal. 50 years from now, 100 years from now, might be different.
any other questions of staff?
Thank you.
Does the applicant,
Ben has his hand up.
I'm sorry, yes.
Well, you just made a comment about the alley. Do we know what the width of the alley is? Is it 28 feet?
13, probably.
Oh, 13. Okay, thank you.
I have a question as well.
Yeah, Commissioner Jessen.
I assume, since I didn't see any paperwork in the staff report and that nobody's talked about it, I assume the answer is no, but was the staff able to find any of the documents from the original application / appeal 20-some years ago?
No, it's just that they're not relevant to this.
Yeah, I don't have them. They were from long enough ago and they've expired and they're not included in the packet material.
But it did happen. I mean, that's, would be able to verify that at least?
We'd have to reconvene. I mean, to answer the question, I mean, I think having that December 2000 approval might be helpful to the council, and knowing if that was approved beforehand and decisions were made based on the approval. But again, and I don't know about a variance with a 10-year time frame on it, so I'm not sure how accurate that statement is. I'd have to verify it. So, there were several comments that I'm just not sure are quite accurate that we could verify if it's relevant to the council, to the commission. But again, it's how relevant is it when it's going back 20 years ago? And
I agree. I just wanted to raise the question because we've all just kind of been talking about it like those are facts of truth when we don't have any documentation for it. So I just wanted to ask the question. Thank you.
Any more questions of staff? Going once, going twice. Okay, we'll now move on to rebuttals, beginning with the applicant. Rebuttal of any information raised during the public testimony. I'll remind the applicant that new information in support of the application may not be introduced during the rebuttal. Does the applicant wish to rebut any testimony?
Yes. In the packet that I submitted, should be on page 4 of the packet I submitted, it says waiver of right of remittance. That's the one that's signed in 2000. Below the first paragraph, it says the waiver and the right of remittance against the improvement shall expire in 15 years. So that's where I came up with 15 years. And that is a City of Paloma document. And stamped by Terry Phillips. That's going to blame her.
Just to clarify, we're talking about the waiver of right of remonstrance. That's part of the application.
Yeah, that's the old one. That's the one that expired.
All right, understood.
But that has nothing to do with the variance.
Of course.
Do we want to make sure that's the point that's heard? That has nothing to do with the variance. It has to do with the partition and access, road access.
My apologies, I'm getting very lost now. It's which page we're on.
I don't think a variance.
Attachment A.
We'd have to look back at some of the old development codes to see how long a variance is in good standing, Typically, it's 18 months. You don't have to do 18 months.
You don't have
It's not. They usually don't go 15 years.
Right in front of one of the pictures.
Sure. I mean, that's the amount.
Mine's redacted.
Oh.
Yeah.
I've got a special copy.
There's nothing to do with the variance.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Pat, I didn't hear anything you just said.
Okay, so this document has nothing to do with the variance at all.
Okay.
It was part of a partition plat. It was very similar to what the applicant with the partition was before, where they had to put in a road in. It's all this document is. It has nothing to do with the variance. We would have to go back to old development codes to see how long variances are in good standing, or what their expiration date is. Typically, it's 18 months. If you don't build or construct it, variance is null and void. I've never seen it in a case where it's 15 years, let alone 10, let alone 5.
So,
and that's just from personal
well,
experience.
let's remember we're in the point of rebuttal, so it's still his turn. We can talk more later.
I would like to apologize. With the piece of paper that I submitted is when we subdivided the lot.
Okay.
And is not the variance that I got when I got the city council to give me a variance for the garage.
Okay.
I don't know. I obviously read the wrong document. This is not the right document. I probably don't have that. That's what I thought it was. But this is me dividing up the property, a different thing altogether.
Yeah.
I thought this was my variance. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any more rebuttal or anything else? Well, do you have any more rebuttal? I'm not allowed to ask if you have anything else. No. All right, thank you very much. There has been no request for continuance or to hold the record open. So I believe I can now close the public hearing.
Waves have made for written.
Oh, yes, thank you. Do you waive the 7-day period to submit a final written argument?
Yes.
Thank you. The public hearing is now closed. So now we're at the point of commissioner deliberations. And Commissioner Hunsaker has his hand up.
Well, I was going to first ask if we could hold the record open on our own because of these questions about the variance and whatnot from before, but you already closed the hearing, so I guess we can't do that. Because I am interested in what was approved in the past, because whether or not it's still valid in a legal sense, it may well be valid in a practical sense. And so I am concerned about that. But if I go by the assumptions that have been made, is that this garage, which was a carriage house, was approved to be replaced. I don't see a reason not to still allow that. We have testimony that the neighbor doesn't care that it's going to be right next to the alley. So I'm okay with it being put there. The alley, by the way, it goes basically to the depth of those two properties. On the other side, to the east, it goes down off a hill. The fact that there would ever be a alley that goes over that is even less likely that you'd ever improve the 50-foot of alley that exists there now that's being used. So I'm not concerned about. So it does allow some space, and in fact, I would suggest that the property owners. Well, I guess I shouldn't get into that part, but they could do something about the alley. To keep the property historic in nature, I mean, obviously the building itself isn't going to be historic, but the desire is to make it pretty much look like it used to, for the most part. I think is admirable to want to do that. And so I believe that when it was originally asked about, can this being historic, that property, the house, I think that is a reason for us to say that this property, the intent of this variance is not a making of their own. It's really a making of the SHPO guidance that they've received. So all of the questions about whether it's valid or not, I don't think there's any of them. The only one that would be is the first one, in that because it's next to the other properties by the alley, that it would be a kind of in the sight line and such. So I don't disagree with that. But if the property owner says they don't care, then I think that issue goes away. So I'm in favor of approving this variance request. Thank you.
Eric, I make a comment that John, the neighbor, is not going to be living there forever. He lives there right now. He may have an issue with it, or not have an issue with it, but the future resident may. So typically, I recognize that we don't bring that kind of rationale into it. But the other thing is, we know we can table this too.
Yeah, I was going to
because we go on and on, and we want to know the answer to the question. Anybody can table this.
Yeah, we can continue deliberations on pretty much anything at a further meeting. Is that true?
So because the public hearing has been closed, we cannot enter any new testimony or evidence into the record, meaning that we can't go and acquire documents for you guys to review. And the applicant has waived his 7-day period to submit additional written arguments. So if you do not have the evidence necessary in front of you that's necessary to approve this variance, then you have to deny it. And again, you need the at the conditions of criteria to make sure that they are met. And if you disagree with what's in the staff report, then you need to be making those findings that support your approval of the variance.
John, the neighbor, did not give testimony.
Yeah, that is worth noting as well. Commissioner Malat?
I'm just gonna be brief. Again, unfortunately, I have long history dealing with SHPOs, not in this state, but in other states. And so the application, as I see it, the documentation of the original garage, based on this documentation, shows a 20-foot deep garage in the north-south direction and 28 feet. If SHPO was to be directly applied, the building would have to sit within that exact footprint.
But we don't know if that's even true.
I can't say that. I know I saw it on the screen, but I can't say that. So there's no documentation that we've been presented of the footprint of the building. And so it seems that the crutch of this is wanting to apply SHPO to this, to apply the historical standards. And if you are treating this building like it was meant to be there originally, it needs to be in the same footprint. If you're treating this like, okay, because there was a building there prior, then it should be all right for me to do what I want to with outside the footprint. So based on that, and based on the language of our development code, I believe staff has done exactly what they should do, and that they have done it correctly based on just the documentation that is here. Because the footprint has been enlarged, even though we have no documentation of what it really was. No documentation has been presented that quantitatively shows where that building was.
So my thought regarding that is I haven't been thinking so much about the historical nature of that building, whether that was there or not there. I'm thinking about the historical nature of that house, how it faces to the south, and how a lot of the property where, if you just saw this plan view, where you would choose to put a garage would not fit within the historical character of the house. What would make total sense if it was just a house facing 8th is that you would put it just to the south between the house and the railroad tracks so that you could just drive in the driveway up into the house. But putting a garage directly in front of the front face of a historical house seems like the wrong thing to do, and without any code to support it, seems like something we should consider as a site constraint. It seems foolish of the city of Philomath to say, oh yeah, this is a historical register house, but go ahead, homeowner, build a garage right in front of the front door. That, to me, that feels wrong and something that we should at least talk about.
I don't think we're suggesting that, are we? Is anyone suggesting that?
No. The appeal is based on, if you look at the language there, we're allowed to consider constraints that are not of the applicant's choosing and making. So
That's not the front of the building.
if there was, what's that?
That's not, this is the front that you're talking about.
Yeah,
Right, and that's
south
exactly what
Okay,
he said.
he's asking
No.
for here.
So let me
Over
finish.
here, or you can with it 15 feet? I mean,
Well,
how far
yeah.
is
So
it?
let's talk about it, but after I finish. So I just want to make the point that the criteria that we're supposed to consider are the constraints on the property that are not of the applicant's choosing. So my biggest question coming into this was, is there a position for this garage that would work well without unduly impacting the historical nature of the house? So could it be on the other side of the house, or this way or that way or something? Whereas I was just using in front of the house on the south side as an example. If that was the only place that you could fit a garage and the only other place was this place, then I would think that is something that we should consider. But I'm not sure that that's true. And the garage could be smaller and not be any closer to the house than is proposed. So. yeah,
Based on that, I'd
Commissioner
like to
Moore.
ask, like staff a question. And considering exactly the language you were just using about putting undue hardship or something to that effect, that.
Constraints not of
with
the owner's choosing.
Undue constraints. Has staff or has staff seen a layout of a garage in that general location that meets the 10-foot separation from the building and the 15 by 15 setbacks? And is that a viable, let's say, two-car garage of equal square footage of the original building?
No one, we're not here to say he deserves a garage this big and that it has to have.
No,
this
well, I'm
space.
just asking that
No,
question.
we've
I-
not
I-
seen that. We have not seen that. I
But
mean,
we
we're not
don't-
here to redesign what he's asking for.
No.
He's asking for right here. We can't look at this as hypotheticals or feelings. I feel like this. And I'm hearing a lot of that and we should just, and all due respect, we really need to follow the facts and the criteria. And we're getting a little bit away from that right now, and it worries me because then I won't know how to go move forward in the future if I can't display the facts and
Can
we
I
just look
respond?
at other
Can I
stuff.
respond? I just want to close the door on what he said.
Yeah.
And that's why I asked the question.
We can.
I mean, I don't want to open that Pandora's box. I want to close the door on that, to say that if we deny this, there are other solutions that can work
By far.
within reason.
Yes.
That's really what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And that's where I was pointing to, is that trying to get us back to criteria.
Yes.
The criteria that we should evaluate, and something that I feel like I disagree with you on, is whether the historic nature of the house is a criteria that we should consider. And I think that we should.
But it's not in the code, and your
Yeah.
position is to follow
Well,
the code.
But hold on, wait a minute. I believe that it is in the code because the code is squishy enough about what those site constraints might be. And the fact that the house faces a weird direction, I think, is a existing constraint. However, that constraint does not preclude, doesn't mean that the only thing that could be done is what's proposed. So the question is there anything that says this is the only solution? I think the answer is no. I just want to establish what criteria we're using to say no. And the criteria is there anything that requires this? And your statement is that it's not required to be this big, and and as you pointed out, it could be situated differently on the other side of the house.
Yes. I agree with that, so.
Okay. Commissioner Barlow.
Question for council, I think. If this body denied the request for a variance, the applicant's remedy is to go to the city council?
Yes,
Can the city council remand to us for further findings?
they could, or they could do it de novo. It, generally speaking, they usually review it de novo, meaning they just review it completely fresh. And all of the testimony that was here tonight would be re-given for purposes of the record. It would be a new record before council as well, I believe, that's my
Because
understanding.
the concern I have is because procedurally, having closed the hearing and the applicant having waived his right to submit additional written testimony, there is stuff I'd like to know. And it seems cumbersome that he has to go up to the city council and they might kick it back to us and say, okay, make the findings you should have made on March 20th.
Well, the findings being that, again, you have what you have in front of you, and so your findings and your decision tonight should be based on that. And so if the city council reviews new evidence that's being submitted to the record, in terms of remanding it back to you based on that evidence, that wouldn't make sense. If they wanted to remand it back to you to interpret something, maybe that would be a reason to remand it, but generally speaking, they would have, especially if there's new evidence that's fitted into the record, they would make their new decision based on what is in the record there.
It would necessarily come back to you, the city council would just make a
Right,
ruling,
they
and
just
they could
de novo.
approve or, yeah.
Because I do think some of the things that I don't know right now would bear on the whole hardship question.
Yeah, I'll just add, I don't disagree. I think there's some documentation that's maybe missing from the application. There was some documentation was submitted that they thought was one thing and was something different. And I think there's some room here.
And they can provide new information.
We could provide
with
new
this
information if
they go
an
to the
appeal
city
came to the
council.
city council and, information could be submitted.
Is it too late to withdraw the application? I think it is at this agreement, right? To withdraw it and then resubmit.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And is there a statute of limitations? It sounds like there was a statute of limitations of some kind on the original variance grant if that occurred. Is there a limitation on the applicant coming back and saying, okay, this is the variance I want?
As long as it meets all the criteria. I mean, even if it doesn't, anyone in this room has a right to come and say, I want to put a, historic carousel in my yard, in my backyard, and it's going to go all the way to the fence line. And if it doesn't meet the criteria, then the commission would say no. If it does, then they would say yes. And so anyone has that right to do that, and they can do it as many times as they want. There just is an application fee, I believe.
Did you say carousel?
Yes.
Did you mean carriage house?
No, I meant.
You meant carousel? Okay.
I thought,
Get our building straight.
I thought I read it, I don't have my book in front of me. All right, but I think if you get denied, you can't come in, you can appeal it, but you can't come back to this board for a year.
Is that the case? Okay.
Yeah, he can appeal it to the city council,
Oh, thank
but he can't come back to commission for a year if you get denied.
Commissioner Hunsaker.
Yes, I guess I wanted to try and address that as well. I mean, I think that there isn't enough information to approve it. I mean, I think that I would like to, but I would need more information. And because I really would need to know what SHPO wants or requires to feel more comfortable with making the decision. But we don't have that. That's been made clear. We don't have all the information. So I think the only thing that we can do at this point is deny it. And in a year, maybe they could come back and with information from SHPO. That's all.
You've changed your perspective.
Yeah, well, I heard some good thoughts.
Good on you, Van.
That's what deliberate.
Yeah, I think from my questioning, it sounds like the applicant is not going to try to apply SHPO to this new outbuilding, and that the historical status on the house is not going to change no matter what he builds for a garage. It sounds like he's not going to try and make it historically accurate. He's not going to apply for SHPO. I don't see a reason that it needs to be in the exact place of the original carriage house. It's not even going to be the exact same size. We haven't heard from the neighbor. It's just conjecture that he's okay with it. There's a lot of hearsay here. I agree we don't have a lot of evidence to approve it. And just going by definition of code, I'm probably leaning towards denying this request.
Somebody like to make a motion?
No, but I have a comment.
Okay.
I don't make motions. I just want to commend Scott and his wife for the application. I think the effort's valiant, and I really don't have any problem with it, other than I think just some documentation's missing. So if the council's not able to approve this, I'll just come out, I'll work with you, try to find some documentation, see what we can do. If you want to take that next step and appeal to the city council, we can see if we can get a more complete application. It's got better background information to them. Because I get where you're coming from. I'm not saying the city council would approve it, even if they had all the information, but there's clearly some information that's lacking here. I'll take some culpability from that on our end, but obviously some stuff got submitted, wasn't accurate, some other things. So, I guess I'm just committing, staff will work with you if this doesn't get approved, Scott. We'll try to find a way to get you what I feel be a more fair consideration, because there's clearly things missing here that just didn't get included in the application. So, and some of that the city might have record of it, some of it we not. We're going back, over 20 years ago, so we'll look.
I'll make a motion that the planning commission deny the file number PC 23-03 variance for 15-foot setbacks
based on the criteria that finding.
Do you want to add that, Van?
Oh, that,
On
that the criteria isn't met.
We have a second.
A second.
Any deliberations on that motion? Additional questions, comments? All in favor of Dan's motion to deny the appeal?
Aye.
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 That is unanimous. Any participant not satisfied with this decision may appeal to the city council within 12 days of the date the notice of decision is signed.
The setbacks apply to the alleyway. We keep talking about 8th Street, but originally when I talked to you guys, you said it was on all 3 sides, alleyways, side streets, and in front.
You can be right up in the
That can be,
0 something. So you guys done? Here?
Well, we have more business, but
Okay, no.
okay, because I thought originally I had 3 different sides that was all 15 feet. I can't go to 0 to the alleyway. I have 8 feet.
Well, let's look at that. I'm not sure that's accurate.
0
Let's
to
double
the
check.
alley?
If you have access to your garage, your doors are facing your garage. Right, I'm sorry. Your doors are facing the alley, it can be 0. It doesn't, it's unclear, and we talked about that, it was unclear.
We need to look at it
The
closer.
side of the garage, or the back of the garage,
Yeah.
to the alleyway, how close to
I'm just going to ask.
Let's talk about it.
that? 5 foot, 0?
5 or 0. Yeah, 5 or 0.
Thank you.
So at this point, we've gone 2.5 hours. Our remaining business are the citizen involvement.
I think it was
Language.
3.5 hours.
3.5.
3.5.
3.5. You are absolutely correct. My apologies.
This is only going to take 10 minutes, so.
Time flies when you're having a lot of fun. It only felt like 2.5. And yeah, every time I think something's going to take 10 minutes, I'm at least an hour off.
So I'll only push on this a little bit just because we were hoping to get to a public hearing on this next month. Pat's already been diligent and notified DLCD that we're planning to have a hearing on this language, have the public come in. And I preface it with that because after we hear from the public, there may be other changes that we want to make to this language, which we can then make before there's an approval and goes to the city council. So this is not your final shot at this. We need to get it close enough that you'll feel comfortable sending it out to the public for a review. We'll take comment, then we'll have some time for some more changes. So we need to be percentage-wise 95% there, if not closer to 100% there. But don't feel like this is your last shot at this. There'll still be time to nitpick on the details.
So I'll go out on a limb and say I have 2 comments that I would like to make. And I would be perfectly happy making those comments and very quickly voting on them or whatever we need to do. And we do have another chance to work it hard, as Mr. Workman said. So the question is, does anybody have extensive comments or really need to talk about some issues in this that would make this a long conversation? Or do we feel like it's a short conversation and we can allow the process to move forward in a relatively short amount of time?
I have a question, but I think it's going to be a short answer.
Okay.
It's just
Well,
why.
Before you ask that, I'd like to either just table it right now or have people make their comments and ask their questions and let this meeting go a little bit longer.
Oh,
I'm not getting any objections, so I'm going to let the meeting go a little bit longer. Ask your question. I'll make my 2 comments.
I'm just wondering why, I don't remember from before, but why we reduced the, the number of days, like mailed at least 14 days rather than 20. And several places we've changed it to a different time period.
That's for consistency, right?
Yeah, I thought we were going for uniform.
Okay.
Yeah,
Other parts in the plan.
on the staffing side, we're going to switched to where we send these notices if they're on like on Monday. And so they'll all be correct. So even if the application's deemed complete on Thursday, we're not going to send notifications out scattered like we have been. We're going to wait till that next Monday, submit everything. So we're going to have a rolling 2-week calendar.
Okay.
So we tried to line everything up to like a 14-day period. So some timeframes got extended, some got reduced, but we were just trying to touch the file once, get the notice out, set the calendar, and then come back to it 2 weeks later.
Okay. And then just a couple of typos I could just show Ruth later.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. My 2 comments is we're in 2 places where it says that the sign posted on the property will direct the public to the city website. I'd like to just include to the city website and City Hall, just so that it doesn't say only go to the website.
It also has the phone number. I mean, the current sign, so the current sign is sitting right back there.
Okay.
And you can't see if the phone number is there also.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that meets my intent. I would just like somebody to have an option other than a website, if they're not inclined to do that they have somewhere else to go.
So you go to City Hall or the city's website.
Yeah, yeah. And to me, putting the phone number on there is good enough. I mean, I'm not too worried about it. I just didn't want to have something in our city code that was only the website and that's all.
Right.
And that's in 2 places.
So, yeah, you have room there to put City Hall, right?
Yeah.
Go to the city's website. Oh, yeah. City's website.
We purposely did not define what has to be on the sign, correct? We left that
Yeah.
kind of loose so that we could put whatever we thought was pertinent.
Well, but it specifically says which directs the public to the city website. And I just want a recognition in there that, and we can argue about it more later.
No, I concur with you. I'm just making that point that I think we didn't make any clear hard line definitions of what has to be on the sign.
Yeah.
For that reason, because it's different every time.
And my other comment is where it says notice provided to the local newspapers. I would change the local newspapers to just news outlets. Get rid of the word local and just make it news outlets rather than paper.
Where does it say local?
It is under the very last
The last page.
page of the section D.
D?
Yes.
I don't see local.
It's in red.
D1D, notice to newspapers.
No, then it's down below.
Oh,
At the end of
It's
the
provided to
paragraph.
local newspapers.
So change that heading to no.
provide to local. Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, and I would change notice to newspapers to notice to news outlets,
Yeah.
just so it's comprehensive.
Publish news outlets that regularly cover the city.
Yeah. Again,
Which
I'm willing to,
subsumes local, that's perfect.
yeah. Right. If they regularly cover the city, I don't care if they're in London.
Yeah.
You know.
I have one. It's in
Okay.
2 places as well. We talked about on these type 2s, putting the sign up, which I think is going to give a lot of notice that we're not giving right now. That's an extra step. We'll make that happen. In my mind, it was either that or that we send notice to property owners as well as what would you consider tenants, or the property address, so that you could get the tenants that are actually living there or the surrounding area of tenants. Because what we hear from tenants is, I didn't know this was happening. I live right next door. Well, yeah, because your landlord got the notice, you didn't get the notice.
Right.
And so both got included in here. I'd argue that both aren't necessary. And in talking to staff, the physical property address one is what's going to cost the most time, the most money, and probably be the less fruitful, because a lot of those are going to get returned back. Those letters as undeliverable. People have post offices, tenants are more likely to have post office and use their physical address, et cetera. So my preference and my recommendation is that we strike the new language that got added and physical property address.
So where is that specifically?
On notice of hearing D,
Me too.
1A, little 2, little I.
Aye.
Yep. So I would recommend striking it there, and then it's also on the next page under D1A III.
Type 4.
And again, if you're going to post the sign there, that's going to give notice to anybody who's living there or in the vicinity.
Yep.
And again, I just trying to save some staff time, save some money, be more efficient. I don't think it's necessary to do both.
Dan has a question.
Yes.
Me?
Yeah, Mr.
You addressed me. Okay.
Commissioner
Um,
Hunsaker.
I do want to remind people, it was something I mentioned at the last meeting, and I didn't get a lot of traction with it. But under the new citizen involvement plan, under engagement, policy 2.2 says social media. Utilize social media platforms to enhance citizen involvement methods and techniques. I talked about using Facebook, which we already have a Facebook page. I do believe that we need to either take that out or put something in about using social media in terms of the things that we do in ways to engage the people. That is, like it or not, Facebook is a place that a lot of people go. We even said last month that it was apparently that's where most people go to get some information about the city. And if we simply posted activities, planning activities there and have them redirect to the city website, I think that's would be an important thing for us to do. And it doesn't seem as that would take a lot of time or effort to do that. But, and I'm good with talking more about it at the next meeting or at the hearing. So I don't need to, we can leave it at that, I guess you could say.
Okay, so do we have any more statements about what's here? New issues? Okay. We could deal with this several ways. We could talk through each one of those and vote whether we make the change or not, or we could say something, or we could make all those changes and then hit it again next time, or we could just make all the additions but none of the deletions so that we don't lose anything. Does anybody have any thoughts regarding that process? This is not quite yet legislative, so we're pretty free to just kind of do by consensus rather than by motions.
I think my personal opinion is that all of the clerical revisions that we brought up so far, we could easily vote to incorporate tonight. I also believe that Van might have a valid point here that we want to discuss at a later time. I really don't have the time to talk about it tonight because it's past 12:30 where I'm located. So if we want to have that discussion, I suggest we table that and continue it at a later time.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Does anybody have any protest? Should we move forward with that approach?
By at another time, we mean after the public hearing?
After the public
Would be
hearing.
the time to talk
Yes.
about specific language there?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect.
We're at the public hearing. Right.
Well, that's our deliberations happen immediately after the public hearing closes.
Same meeting, just different minute.
We could even start the public hearing by asking people what they think about social media if we want it to be really interesting.
For a long night.
Yeah.
So let's go and get a motion on the table to approve the amendments to
The amendments discussed, except for what Van discussed,
Social media.
right,
except for any revisions regarding social media.
and to hold a public hearing next month, which would be April looking for a calendar. In April, hold a public hearing in April.
17th.
April-ish.
The last Monday or the third Monday?
Second, or yeah, third Monday.
Third Monday, so it's the 17th.
Okay.
I can't make motions.
Neither, I'm told I'm not supposed to either.
Okay, so moved.
That's fine.
There we go.
That actually works, I think.
All right.
Excellent.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That was unanimous.
Was that less than 10 minutes? That's my question.
Yeah.
Close.
I have a question though. We still have a whole bunch of code to go through. When are we gonna start on that?
Patience.
As soon as possible.
So the
After
hearing for this section will be next month. Pending any type of land use application that comes in the next, I don't know, week or so. Our intent is to have some material prepared for you on the economy chapter of the comprehensive plan. I don't know that we'll get all the way to specific code language, but similar to this, we'll bring you the economy chapter, we'll bring you the recommendations for the strategic implementation. We might have some code language for you, but not likely. We'll likely just have the policy stuff and then start looking through which direction you want us to go with code. Then we'll bring you some actual sample code language back in May.
in May. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
If we get a land use application, then that'll just get bumped a month, so.
Thank you again for the staff updates. That's,
Comment to the commission?
yes, please.
You guys rock on your filings of the OGEC's report.
Good.
You are just slaying the city council right now. Contest to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, feel free to goad them with that staff.
I defy you to find a city council person with a worse bracket than mine.
Done.
Just to get it over with in the first few days.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to say thank you for the staff report and this update. I think it really helps me feel like I'm competent as a planning commissioner. And back when we were not doing these, I just felt out of touch, and I feel much more aware, which makes me feel like I'm not doing things in a vacuum quite as much.
Leilani
So I know it
and
takes
Ruth
time,
and
but-
Pat do a great job pulling all that together. That's a great.
And I think it's very important, so.
Yeah,
thank
it's
you.
really helpful.
Thank you.
And I think with that, that's enough said. Meeting adjourned.